Welcome to Behind the Radio, Season 3.
Good evening, curious minds out there across the world, and welcome to the BTR for Season 3, Episode 2, Who Killed the Kennedys, Part 2, The Cover-Up. This shouldn't be an incredibly long BTR this time. I feel like I left pretty much all of it out there on the field, so to speak, with these two episodes. The three things that probably stood out to me the most when I was doing this episode, the research for it anyway, was George Bush knowing Oswald's name and calling it in to the FBI at 1:40 p.m., like just after it happened, saying that he had learned of a man who was vowing to kill the president, and it just so happened to be Oswald. I think it's kind of odd that he had prior knowledge of that situation and did not act on it, did not do anything to try to abate that situation or prevent it from happening. That definitely struck me as odd and odd but not unexpected, particularly knowing that I am fairly certain of his role in the entire plot. And I think that's a big reason why the records weren't released for all that time. It wasn't until after he died that you really started to get any kind of significant releases that weren't totally redacted. Aside from like the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee on Assassinations, those two reports, and then a whole bunch of, stuff that nobody really cares about, doesn't lead anywhere, and doesn't point the finger anywhere that they don't want a finger pointed, I guess would be the best way I can put that. I guess the second thing that really stuck out to me was just how the Parkland trauma doctors and nurses, on record, multiple times, some have written books, but they described that they noticed the small entry wound in the front of the neck, and also the front to back trajectory of the bullets, it seemed. And the throat wound existed well before any intubation happened. And we know that due to multiple doctors, and Audrey Bell, the nurse that was attending, have all come out and said it. In later interviews, at least 17 different doctors and nurses described seeing exit wounds, 7 at least, including Dr. McClellan, Carrico, Jones, Peters, Delaney, Clark, and of course Dr. Charles Crenshaw, as we spoke about in the last episode, as well as nurse Audrey Bell. They all described seeing a small wound in the throat and a large avulsive wound on the rear right side of the head, which both of those are pretty difficult to do if you're only being shot from behind. And I also found an account in a medical journal, I'll tell you more about that in a minute, by a doctor named Adolf Geiske, I believe. And I wanted to go ahead and just read that to you, and then I'll give you some more details about it. But this is a first-hand account of exactly what happened right before, during, and after Kennedy was brought to Parkland Hospital and being worked on. And Dr. Geiske describes the event as follows. I was in the main dining room of Parkland Memorial Hospital discussing a research project with Dr. Jenkins when the call came over the hospital's address system. Dr. Shires to the emergency room stat. That was very strange. Dr. Shires was the chairman of the Department of Surgery and was never page stat. Only interns and residents were page stat. And if you aren't familiar with medical terms, or you've never somehow watched any of the medical shows, stat, it just means immediately, as quick as you can. But it actually comes from the Latin word statim, I believe. Fun little piece of pointless trivia for you there. Dr. Ron Jones, a surgery resident, went to the telephone, called the operator, and learned that the wounded president was on his way to our emergency room. Dr. Jenkins said that he would go directly to the emergency room, and he instructed me to go to the operating room to fetch a cardiac monitor and anesthesia machine. The time was 12:30 p.m. The first doctor to see the president on his arrival to Trauma Room 1 was James Carrico. And to be clear, that might be Carrico. It's one or the other. It's spelled C-A-R-R-I-C-O. Anyway, back to this account. He saw the small wound in the lower anterior neck and the large avulsive wound on the rear right side of the head. Dr. Carrico had just completed a rotation in anesthesiology and performed over 50 endotracheal intubations. He judged that the president needed ventilatory support through an endotracheal tube. During his laryngoscopy, he noted that the light came through the anterior neck wound in the trachea. He advanced the tube past the wound. Dr. Malcolm Perry, a member of the surgical attending staff, was next to arrive and converted the neck wound to a tracheotomy. I just want to pause on that, maybe say it one more time, and converted the neck wound to a tracheotomy, which is very important because they have tried for years to play that off as an exit wound, and it was not. It is verifiably not an exit wound. And considering that there was already an endotracheal intubation in place, meaning sending the tube in the mouth and down the throat all the way into the lungs, there really was no need at all to do any cutting on the neck. The tube was past that point, so it's all just a little bit odd. Anyway, back to the story. Pepper Jenkins was next to arrive and connected the endotracheal tube and subsequently the tracheotomy tube to the Bennett automatic ventilator. I arrived with the ECG monitor and anesthesia machine. The monitor required needle electrodes. A weird sensation of numbness came over me when I pushed the needles into the president's skin. Insertion of the needles brought no withdrawal. The monitor showed a flat line. Dr. Kemp Clark, chairman of neurosurgery, arrived. He and Dr. Perry began exterior cardiac massage. Dr. Jenkins connected the anesthesia machine to the tracheotomy tube and ventilated manually during the cardiac massage. Dr. Carico and Jones successfully started the IV in the left forearm. Remembering that the president had a history of Addison's disease, Dr. Jenkins suggested the addition of hydrocortisone in the IV solution. I was called to help across the hall in Trauma Room 2, where Governor Conley lay wounded in the right chest, right wrist, and left thigh. The remainder of my day was spent with the governor. Back in Trauma Room 1, Dr. Charles Baxter, a member of the surgical staff and director of the burn unit, inserted chest tubes bilaterally. Dr. Jenkins, who was by the head, requested Dr. Clark to examine the head wound, which he did, while Dr. Perry continued external cardiac massage. Dr. Clark declared that the massive head wound was not survivable and pronounced the president dead at 1:00 p.m. 25 minutes after he arrived at the hospital. Lyndon Johnson ordered the body removed immediately over the objection of Dr. Earl Rose, the county coroner. The autopsy was performed at Bethesda, Maryland by Dr. Humes, Boswell, and Fink. Lyndon Johnson took the oath of office aboard Air Force One at 2:38 p.m., 2 hours and 8 minutes after the first shots were fired. And that was taken directly from AHA Bulletin of Anesthesia History, Volume 18, Number 3, from July of 2000, and was written by Adolph H. Geis, MD, retired Jenkins professor and former chairman of anesthesiology and pain management, University of Texas Southern Medical School, Dallas, Texas. He was one of the doctors who worked on President Kennedy. As you heard in the first-hand account that we just went through, one of many from that hospital which directly contradict the official narrative, by the way. There was a small entry wound in the neck and a large exit wound on the right posterior cranial region. So how is it possible that Kennedy was shot twice from behind, and only from behind, yet had a large exit wound on the rear of his head, an obvious entry wound described as being the circumference of a pinky finger in the front of his throat, as well as another shallow wound to his back with no frontal exit wound being found? In fact, aside from the official autopsy account at Bethesda, after it's cleared that the head wound was altered in some way and definitely the throat wound was expanded into a much larger wound to accommodate a seemingly pointless tracheotomy, despite Kennedy already being intubated as described in the AHA bulletin that I just read to you. So Bethesda and the final report of the Warren Commission are the only ones at all, it would seem, who saw any obvious signs of an exit wound in the front of the body. I'll give everyone a minute to just process that one, just in case this is new to any of you guys, or you have always thought that it was weird but that it would never be proven. None of the doctors or nurses at Parkland who have actually spoken honestly about this have reported exit wounds on the front. Humes at Bethesda Naval Hospital, despite being corralled into saying that the wound on the back of his head was both an entry and exit wound, realized after his exam and x-ray of the piece that was that missing piece of skull that he was brought to him, I'm sure if you heard the episode you remember that part, and that it was verifiably an exit wound on the back of the skull. So to be clear, the official story is that all shots came from a single location behind the president's motorcade, from a gun that could not be properly sighted in, and would not stay sighted once it was, every single shot knocking it more out of alignment. Just important to note, and only one shot missed. One went through Kennedy's neck, into Conley's chest, through his right wrist, and embedded itself into his thigh, somehow, only to be later discovered by Parkland employee Daryl Tomlinson on a stretcher in the hospital hallway, completely and utterly intact, without any significant signs of deformation that hitting virtually anything, much less four somethings, should have caused. Then we have the final shot, also from the rear, also with the gun that was impossible to sight and only got worse with subsequent shooting, in the hand of a man who was known as a poor marksman only 30 days before this event, effectively passed 3 different paraffin tests made from the furthest distance of any of the shots, is the one that caused the fatal head wound, which caused Kennedy's head to jerk backwards and to the left and exploded skull and brain matter out over the rear of the car, landing on the trunk of it and other places. That's it? So, hold on. That's the official narrative that these people expect us to believe happened. And they've stood behind this for 60 years. More than 60 years. Despite numerous investigative journalists, some former law enforcement or military people in that group, and over 200 books have refuted that story. The Warren Commission couldn't prove it. The House Select Committee couldn't offer a alternative because they were pretty much, blocked at every attempt that they had to question anyone within the government about it. But they also, they said that it was most likely the result of a conspiracy. A preponderance of evidence out there, and it all directly contradicts this official story. It's video and it's audio evidence that fails to support it. Numerous witnesses who were harassed into changing their story, many of them. A lot of them killed for refusing to actually do so. Records that were promised to be released only to be over and over not released by presidential order until finally Trump's presidential order mandating their full release. And then, even then, the CIA didn't release anything. And throughout this process, the CIA and FBI destroyed tons of evidence along the way. Yeah, no doubt. Who could possibly question that? Must just be those crazy conspiracy theorists and their nutty theories again. This is a linchpin, in my opinion. There's a watershed moment for the country, but it is very much a linchpin in understanding that conspiracies are real and they do happen in this country too. It's not just every other country around the world, as they seemingly have convinced a lot of people to believe. And the last thing that stuck out to me, I just want to touch on this real quick, was the Jolly West thing with Ruby. That is a long, dark, deep rabbit hole I found very interesting. If you look into Jolly West well enough, I promise your mind will be blown by all the things that guy was up to. So to have him directly involved in Ruby's case was definitely a moment that made me, I guess, question a little harder about what exactly was going on with him, which was an element that I had pretty much looked over in the past. I didn't figure I'd be able to get the information that I needed to prove or disprove anything definitively through that. So, but that little detail definitely sparked a lot of interest for me. But I don't feel the need to go beat for beat back through the entire episode. It's too long, and this BTR is almost too long as it is, so I just did want to point out at least a few of the points that kind of accentuate that tremendous chasm between what we were told and what the evidence shows in that whole case throughout the entirety of it. I know I've called out and I've rode the CIA pretty hard throughout these 2 episodes, but in the interest of fairness and not being disappeared to a black site somewhere, I don't feel that it was the entire CIA, but rather a small clique within the CIA that was essentially serving their own and their handlers' interest over the country's. There is good and bad in any profession. You're going to have that in any job in the world, pretty much. That's just the nature of it. So when I say the CIA throughout these, I really mean that element within the CIA. I just wanted to make that clear. So come on, spooks. You know I love you guys. We're all good here. I also wanted to say that I'm aware that there are things that I've missed throughout this and things that I left out either for pacing or to help ensure that the episode was left up, I guess. If you have something that you found through your own or someone else's research that you feel everyone needs to know about, that was missing from this episode, then tell myself and others about it in the comments section on the Spotify page. We can react to those now, and I'll respond to any of them that I can. So I definitely read each and every comment. And also, it really does help the show out, because the more that you beautiful folks out there actually engage with the episodes, be that through, answering the weekly polls or just leaving a comment, the more Spotify will actually recommend and show the show to other people on the platform. And the more other people are likely to actually interact with it as well. These episodes will get thousands of plays, which is great. I truly appreciate each and every one of you for listening. It means the world. And that hopefully means that you guys at least enjoy these, but little to no interaction or comment seem to ever want to happen. And I don't want to harp on this, but really, aside from genuinely caring what all of you think, I want this show, and especially these BTR episodes, to be more of a two-way conversation than it is. And to have kind of like an open dialogue with you guys, I guess. I want you to know that you guys are all appreciated and play a very active role in shaping the future of this show so that it can be more enjoyable to everybody that listens. And I'm sure that it gets old, and every creator asks for this ad nauseum, so I'll stop going on about it. But it is completely free, like everything else that we offer here, and it does really help out. The more interaction that we show here and on the social pages, the quicker that the show will grow, and I can get the guests that you guys really want to hear from. Anyway, enough of all that. There isn't a ton of news going on right now. I mean, at least not that I really want to get into anyway. But there are a couple of quick things that I will at least kind of go off the cuff and talk about real quick. Just stick around if you're curious. I'd love if you did. And let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and preface this off the jump. The first topic that we're going to get into is kind of a hot button topic, if you will, and I don't want to offend anyone, and I hope that it isn't seen as taking any one group in its entirety and calling them out for this. It's very specific people with a very specific agenda who are the ones that I'm talking about here. This is just a news story, and you are welcome to, feel however you'd like about it. If you disagree with my opinions of things, that's absolutely fine. But that's what this portion of the show is about. I give you news, I give you my thoughts on it. So please feel free to leave a comment. I ask that you please be respectful to anyone else in the comment section. I don't really care what you have to say to me. I mean, not in a negative way, but you are welcome to, tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm stupid, tell me whatever you want. But please at least be kind to each other if there's any comments going on this one. Alright, with that lead in out of the way, today is Wednesday, April 23rd of 2025, and here's what's on my mind this evening. First up, over to Israel, where despite Hamas offering to release all hostages that it currently holds in exchange for a permanent ceasefire, my least favorite genocidal little tyrant, Benjamin Netanyahu, has vowed only to ramp up Israel's military presence and to continue the onslaught, which Hamas claims has killed 51,000 Palestinians since the shots and bombs began. Other sources vary regarding the actual number that they have dead over there, with some Israeli sources reporting as low as 5,000 to 7,000 as of the beginning of 2025, and only an additional 500 something since. However, the official numbers from Gaza Health Ministry tell a different story. As of April the 8th, they have it at 52,000, further breaking that down to 50,810 Palestinians, 1,706 Israelis, along with 166 journalists and media workers, 120 academics, and over 224 humanitarian aid workers, with 179 of them being employees of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East, which might be the most verbose agency name that I think I've had to say. Scholars have estimated that 80% of the Palestinians killed were civilian deaths, with a high number of those being women and children, a number that several independent sources that verified the fatalities put at upwards of 70% of all the deaths. This is only counting the dead directly caused by the war. So through direct military actions, in other words, with untold others dying from lack of basic medical care, starvation, unclean or non-existent drinking water in parts, or easily preventable and treatable diseases. Netanyahu said again this past Saturday that Israel has, quote, no choice but to continue the bombing and fighting in Gaza, and that it will not end the war before destroying Hamas, freeing the hostages, and ensuring that the territory won't present a threat to Israel. He also repeated his vow to prevent Iran from producing a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu, who has been under growing pressure, both at home as well as on the global stage as a whole, with the Israeli pressure from not only families of the hostages, but also their supporters, along with reservists and retired Israeli soldiers, who they've seen the death and destruction up close. They know how horrible those conditions are over there. But old Bibi has said that Hamas has rejected Israel's latest proposal to free half of the hostages in return for another temporary ceasefire. And just can't really blame them, the last of those Israel violated. Hamas made their offer as a counter instead, which consisted of a full release of all of the hostages, but only if Israel withdraws from Gaza and agrees to a lasting ceasefire, as called for in the agreement that Israel ended, and that is per the Associated Press. Meanwhile, Israel has continued its offensive with more than 90 additional people added to the death toll just over last weekend between Friday and Saturday. To be crystal clear, should anyone listening to this have this confused in any way whatsoever, I unequivocally condemn Hamas and terrorist actions by any nation as a whole. But I also condemn genocide and ethnic cleansings, which I hate to say it, but the more this drags on, the more it starts to resemble, if we're being honest about it. And as I've said from the start, and I've tried to demonstrate with evidence, not long after it happened, the October 7th attack, in my evidence-based opinion, appears to have been allowed, if not encouraged and facilitated by Israel, in order to garner sympathy and support for their actions that followed. Actions they have been dying to do for a very, very long time now. Again, this is simply the evidence along with my personal opinion. I suggest as always that you research for yourself, and so that you can come to your own conclusions about it. But do not fall into the trap of believing that any critique of Israel is anti-Semitic in any way, or to call out the state of Israel is, or even the Zionists in charge, or hold them accountable for their actions. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that, just because they happen to also be Jewish. It's not the Jewish people that are the problem, it's the Zionists that are in charge. And now for something a little bit lighter and less controversial. Our next story, in other global news, Prince William and Kate Middleton opted to skip the royal Easter celebrations with King Charles and pedo Prince Andrew, allegedly, for the second year in a row. And this apparent snubbing of the royals has people in England asking one burning question: who f***ing cares? And in local news, back over here in the U.S., President Donald J. Trump's ongoing tariff tiff with China and others has both national security and cyber threats experts warning of the potential likelihood of cyber threats increasing, considering that U.S. infrastructure has repeatedly been proven to be vulnerable at best to non-existent in worst cases. Regarding its cybersecurity, tensions have been high around the capital, with recent attacks such as the attack from last spring against municipal water plants in rural Texas, as well as a more recent campaign known as Salt Typhoon that was linked to China and sought to crack the phones of U.S. officials, including Trump's, in the lead up to the 2024 election. Tensions have remained high as the current trade war continues. Also potentially vulnerable are communications networks, as illustrated by Volt Typhoon, another supposed China hacking attempt to compromise U.S. telephone networks, as well as key infrastructure such as power plants, pipelines, hospitals, and even financial systems could be at risk. China has of course denied all U.S. allegations of hacking, accusing America of trying to smear Beijing while also conducting its own cyber attacks. A claim so outrageous that former U.S. President Joe Biden was quoted as saying, "What? Where am I, Jill?" Democrats may have broken out a completely new strategy to face this, though, one that they feel could really turn the situation around. What is this incredible novel technique that they've come up with? Blaming Donald Trump. With Democrat Virginia Senator Mark Warner, top dog of the Senate Intelligence Committee, being quoted as saying that U.S. forces, quote, face unprecedented cyber threats, end quote, before going on to question the recent firing by Trump of General Timothy Hall, who previously oversaw the NSA and Pentagon Cyber Command, and asking, quote, how does firing him make America any safer, end quote. In response to this, Pete Hegseth fired back at him, saying, quote, American flag, fire emoji, fist bump, middle finger, which is reportedly just echoing the sentiments of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's comments on the matter. Yeah, sorry. If I seem a bit jaded about the news at this point, that's probably because I kind of am. I typically try to chase down stories that either haven't received much attention or have been completely unreported by the legacy media and the papers and all that. But when you see stories like the brutal murder of 8 Red Cross paramedics and 5 aid workers, each of them being shot upwards of 20 times by Israeli soldiers, and while England descends into an Orwellian Big Brother hellscape of punishing its citizens for wrongthink, regarding comments that they made online somewhere, comments that in most instances didn't even violate the ever more censorship-centric social media site that they appeared on. And President Trump, who felt like a last hope for freeing us from the fierce grip of these warmongers and censorship and endless excuses for silencing dissent, and I will concede that he has kept promises, a lot of them, and done a good bit to steer us back towards some degree of sanity in this country in some regards. But he's so far struck out with the ending the Ukraine NATO-fueled conflict against Russia. And regardless where you fall on this matter, deporting student protesters for peacefully exercising their right to protest against Israel's massacre of Palestinians, while also proposing that the U.S. essentially invade the West Bank, displacing the innocent residents of Gaza, all while building it back, jokingly I pray, with a bunch of resorts. If England thinks that they have a migrant problem now, oh, just wait. I mean, they clearly do, but still, just wait. And speaking of England, if it hadn't been for a massive and immediate backlash, the Sentencing Council for England and Wales were planning to pass legislation that would effectively create a two-tier justice system by changing the usage of something called a PSR, or a pre-sentencing report. PSRs are basically just reports about a defendant that's written by the probation officers to try and assist judges in determining a sentence by basically advocating for probation. If there's a potential that a defendant might avoid prison, then nearly every time his attorney will want a PSR. While it's ultimately still up to the judge if he chooses to abide by their recommendation, it's at least a little bit more difficult for a judge to lock someone up when he has a document in front of him that is arguing for a non-custodial sentence from an expert. I mean, come on, you know you can always trust the experts. And that's filled up, as they typically are, with very knowledgeable and scientific-y looking charts and sociological analysis to support that recommendation. They're not required if a judge deems it unnecessary, though, because the judge is, at that point probably very sure that they're going to be sent to prison over their crime, so they don't see any reason for having the PSR. But otherwise, a report must be obtained. And I don't want to go too far down the whole story of all this, because it's probably going to end up being a moot point, but it did have a lot of people in England very upset. Under the new guidelines, it adds to the unnecessary exemption. A PSR will normally be considered necessary if the offender is from an ethnic minority. While the changes may seem minor, and its effects possibly benign, opponents say that when it's a close case, the new change will nudge judges to order a PSR when they ordinarily wouldn't. And then, with the PSR in front of him recommending a community order, anyone who isn't white has a significantly higher chance of avoiding custody. The opposition is somewhat understandable when you factor in the recent surge of migrant-dominated violence that the country has seen, and not to mention the rape gangs, as well as the ever-increasing Big Brother-esque arrests of English, predominantly white citizens for everything from asking someone to please speak English to grief-stricken mothers venting over a recent murder of a young girl by immigrants online, and even a suburban couple being arrested by 6 armed officers over negative comments that they made through messages and emails, all while violent and sexual crimes have shot through the roof since England opened its doors up to illegal immigrants and refugees from war-torn European and Middle Eastern countries, with many of its own citizens feeling like nothing is being done to investigate or stop this from happening, making parts of Great Britain the most recent victims of the same globalist agenda that the U.S. only narrowly avoided itself. The same plan that has also seen Labour MPs calling for digital IDs to, quote, combat illegal immigration and employment, and supposedly allow citizens to, quote, engage with the state more seamlessly, end quote, as in they can track and monitor you more seamlessly, deny service without vaccination more seamlessly, control the population en masse more seamlessly, like never before. And while I'm really glad that we managed to keep that cackling globalist shill Kamala out of the Oval Office, sorry Democrats, you know it's true. For now at least, and hopefully slow down the advancement of the more totalitarian of the globalists' immediate plans anyway. I still have a watchful eye on its advancement in other places around the world, and I remain skeptical about some of Trump's decisions since taking office, and where exactly some of them may have come from or may lead to. So yeah, I'm a bit jaded with current news at the moment. Sorry. While I did my best to add a little bit of levity to this news brief, I can't help but still feel like this may only be the calm before the storm for America. As always, though, I hope that I'm wrong about that. I hope that we really are about to enter a new golden age in America, and hopefully for everyone around the world as a whole. You never know, we might be. But if we are, I remain skeptical that it will be endowed to us from some benevolent governmental actions. I am far more inclined to believe that it would be a result of we the people and our increasing distrust and discontentment with the status quo, legacy media, democide, genocide, and kneeling on command, which would be accomplished through sheer determination, refusal to accept the lies any longer, no more manipulation, no more propaganda, division, derision, deception, and pure unadulterated grade A fuckery that they have put us through and has put us in this spot to begin with. That we maybe finally learn to work together and we demand better from our government, better from one another, and better from ourselves. Because if we can ever fully shake off the shackles of our mental slavery and actually come together in unity, then no matter what happens, regardless of what any regime, government, globalist, or hacker tries to throw at us, we will remain standing. And we will weather the storm, and we will prevail together. And that, my friends, will be the best news of all. But that's enough of my ranting and raving for one night. If you guys want to know what I think about anything else, leave me a comment, I'll respond to it, or join the Discord chat. I'm in there during every episode premiere, and I usually stick around for an hour or two. And also come back and check it. So if you leave a message and I'm not there to answer it in the moment, I'll definitely get back to you on it. And I'll be happy to tell you what I think about whatever you want to know. And I just want to go ahead and thank everybody for coming back this season. Thank you for spreading the word and for sticking with me. It truly means the world that you guys choose to spend your most precious of commodities listening to me tell stories and ramble on about things every week. Or at least every other week on average. I'm doing my best to try and keep the pace up this season, though, and I'm going to strive to bring some sort of content to you every single week if I can. There will be breaks here and there, but it's really just unavoidable when I'm just the only guy. I'm one man trying to research, write, record, edit, and produce these things for you. And some of this season's episodes required a ton of research and fact-checking to put them together the way that I want to. I still refuse to just poop something out for the sake of schedule or algorithms. I'm not going to do it. I want to give you guys the most quality content that I can. I do promise to never just put out filler for the sake of it. That being said, I've got so many episodes that I'm incredibly excited to finally be doing this season for you guys. And it will easily be our biggest season yet. Several are dense and research heavy, but I will try my absolute best to keep them as fun as the material will allow. And not just with terrible off-the-cuff dad jokes like the news section had, but by breaking things up and adding as much of the humorous or crazy details about something as I can. Being myself a little bit more this year. I'm trying to get out of the, proper podcasting, straightforward delivery of the material, and just kind of open up a little more. And I'm also going to be mixing in some of the lighter and more fun episodes to kind of help ease the sting of the darker and heavy episodes that we do have throughout this season. I mean, they're dark and they're heavy and some of them are very dense, but they're really intriguing. And I feel like they're really important stories for you to hear. A lot of people are totally unaware of a lot of the cases that I'm going to be talking about. Or they only, have like a cursory understanding of it, or they think it's not a big ordeal or anything. But there's a lot of really critical information coming this season. And I'm going to do my best, like I said, to make it as enjoyable as possible. But those episodes are important. And I've got a lot of really cool, interesting, fun, kind of weird stories to bring you too. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. We're going to do a mid-season break, and right before that, I've got something pretty fun planned. And I'm working already on our New Year's Eve finale that we do every year. And I think this one will be the best one yet, for sure. And I guess that's really it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this last two-part series. I genuinely love to hear your thoughts, good or bad. And in the spirit of that, I'm going to pose one quick question for you guys. I'd love to see your answers. Who do you think killed JFK? People have been asking that question for over 60 years now. I feel like I gave a pretty good answer for it, based on all the evidence to the best of my ability. But I would love to know who you guys think was ultimately responsible for it. And I'm going to get out of here. Hope you guys have a fantastic evening. Take care of yourselves out there. Take care of one another if you can. And I'll talk to you guys again real soon on the next Clandestine Radio.